Not sure how to tackle your taxes? Are you sweating the small print? You may be experiencing FOMO, the fear of messing up. The answer? Using TurboTax on Intuit Credit Karma. They help you get your biggest refund, and then we help you do more with it, with a personalized plan designed to help you hit your money goals. It's time to take your taxes to the max. Start filing today in the Credit Karma app.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good morning. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, we are privileged to have with us today the 37th Commissioner of the Fire Department of New York, Lillian Bonsignore. And I've been privileged to know her, I'd say easily 20 years. All right?
It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever you ask a young child, what do you want to do when you get older? They'll say, I want to be a firefighter, or I want to be a policeman. And the question I often think is, what is it about being a firefighter or a policeman that captures the hearts of young people and then later on in life captured your heart?
Yeah, well, good morning to all of your listeners today. I think it's just the nature of service. I think there are special people that are just called to a job that is surrounded by service. You know, it's about showing up for those who are in need and helping the most vulnerable. And these are things that drive us. I didn't want to be a police officer or a firefighter. I wanted to be a doctor when I was young.
Oh, so your family is Jewish.
I bet you they are. I wanted to be a doctor, but my life didn't really set me up for that. And I met a couple of people in my pathway who really set me on my way. And I thank them every single day. I think because of their little bit of caring for a stranger and just grabbing hold of me and never letting go, they helped me navigate this life, which led to me becoming the 37th commissioner, the fire department.
Wow. Service even at the expense of losing your life.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's really what a statement.
But that's an interesting journey because you had years in with EMS as EMS chief, right?
I did. You know, I did 31 years with the fire department, and I retired for 3 years before coming back as the fire commissioner. When I said I wanted to be a doctor, and two women came into my pathway when I was young. I was right around 11 and 14. They did not know each other. One was my personal pediatrician, and one was an educator at the school that I went to. And each of these women interacted with me as a child, and I guess saw something in me I may not have seen in myself, and became my mentors, both of them. One was studying, medicine, and the other was education. And when I said I wanted to be a doctor, I seriously did. So that my pediatrician always knew that, and she taught me a lot. I was reading X-rays when I was a teenager. She taught me how to do that. But at one point, she says, enough's enough, because my life didn't necessarily set me up to be a success as far as going to medical school. I was one of 4 kids living in the Bronx with a single mother, and I had a child when I was 18 years old. There were challenges. She was a blessing, by the way, but there are challenges that I had to overcome that made it difficult for me to move forward with my dreams. So the doctor says, it's time you get into medicine. You need to take an EMT class, and then we'll figure out how you're going to go to medical school. So she said, I'll pay for it if you need me to, but I didn't. I paid for it, and I went to EMT school, and I came through the class. I loved the class. It was exactly what I was looking for at that time, and I got hired by EMS, which at that point was not even part of the fire department. And I fell in love with this job of service and just caring for other people. It was exactly what I needed to do. So rather than it be a summer job, it turned out to be a 31-year summer job. Yeah. I spent my life there moving up the ranks in EMS. My entire adult life was spent there. I moved up from EMT to lieutenant, paramedic to captain to chief. I ran the EMS training academy for several years, and I thought that was going to be the end. That's where I'd retire from. It was the most wonderful job. I enjoyed it very much, and then I was offered the chief of EMS operation position, which meant that I was now running all of EMS. I took that job right before COVID came through New York City, so it became, very much my primary goal to navigate New York City through COVID. We know that all of our ambulances and our EMS system were on the front lines, and certainly the FDNY was out there doing ridiculously wonderful work during the most challenging times. And I spent about 4 years, it was a little less than 4 years in that position. And then I retired. It was 31 years that had gone by and time to retire. And I did, and I loved it. And then 3 years later, they offered me this position as the fire commissioner.
Wow. Commissioner, you oversee a force of over, I think more than 11,000 firefighters, 4,500 EMTs and paramedics, and another 2,000 civilian employees. That's quite a bit to have under your responsibility. What is that like?
It's wonderful. I mean, there are 17,000 plus people who are just showing up every day to do the best job they can do to provide, the highest level of care for the people in New York. We're an all hazards, all emergency response agency now. So anywhere you turn, we'll be there.
So the department obviously has changed. And I listened to part of your testimony in front of the city council. And you spoke about parity. And you said, given what we do, there should be some kind of parity, some kind of equality fiscally. And that's been advocated by a number of people over the years. And we're not at that point. Mm-hmm. So where do you see this going? I mean, is this going to be the time we finally get there? Do we have the money, or other unions going to say, well, and by the way, parity, from what I understand, is not just a challenge here in New York City. Around the country, this is an issue.
Right. EMS, compared to the other first responder agencies, is quite young as an emergency first responder agencies, or a profession. Here in New York City, EMS has been part of the fire department for 30 years. We just celebrated our 30th year anniversary, and they make a significant amount less than their counterparts, the firefighters. And it's become very difficult to get people to want to, come to a job like EMS, being an EMT or paramedic, and then stay for a long time. So, we need to have parity. We need to embrace EMS as a first responder profession and have everybody on the same level.
Wow. Have you seen, are we moving in that direction? Do you see some hope for the future?
I am very optimistic. I feel hopeful. I think I'm talking to people who want to listen and want to solve really difficult problems. It won't be easy to solve, but I do have high hopes that we're going to find ourselves in a good place and really take this problem on.
You said, of course, it's Women's History Month, 2026, and you were just celebrated as one of the pioneers within this industry. How does it feel to be among an elite group of women who have reached this level? Because, at one time, it would never happen in our world.
That is true. I'm actually the second woman to run the fire department.
That's right, Kavanaugh.
Yeah, we had Laura Kavanaugh who led the way, and I'm the second, and it feels wonderful. And I feel very supported, and I'm surrounded by amazing people who really are truly heroes, and I'm happy to be among them.
We got to go to a break, Rabbi and Commissioner, but we'll be back with more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Red Apple Radio Network.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rev and the Rabbi. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And we are here with the 37th Commissioner of the Fire Department of New York, Lillian Bonsignore.
So, as we're talking about women in positions of power and influence and breaking glass ceilings, etc., and I ask you, what's that like for you? Because there are challenges being a woman and being in this kind of leadership, especially with a male-dominated entity such as a fire department. What is that like?
You know, I did spend my entire adult life here, so I think I have a little bit of a leg up when it comes to the fire department because I've known them for so long. I've grown up around them. I understand the culture and the language and the people. I've been very supported. I've been very fortunate. I think women sometimes have a struggle when they're getting into these top leadership positions, particularly, like you said, when it's a male-oriented kind of job or profession. But the experience that I've had is this. I am confident in my abilities, and I exude that confidence with the people around me, and they respect that. And I'm also never afraid to say I don't know. And, you know, the people around me are people who are willing to help. We do this for a living. We help each other. That's why we're here. So I think, it's very helpful, the fact that I have come up in this system. So we do understand each other in a different way than most other places. But for other women coming up in leadership positions, I think it's important that you just be yourself, be honest, and be confident about your abilities. And that puts people's mind at risk, not at risk, but at rest. Sometimes when they feel like, yes, this is somebody who cares, this is somebody who really understands, and this is somebody who's here to help us. And then when we need help, we should just ask for it. You know, it's not the same in every business, and I don't want to give that impression that it's just that easy, because I know it isn't that easy for everyone. But I've been very fortunate in my career.
You know what I find very impressive about you? Your sense of humility, that you don't walk into a room and proclaim that you're the smartest person in the room. You look for guidance from others who may know more. Even if they don't know more, you still make them feel your voice matters. I want to hear from you. You listen to people. And I think those are great qualities to have. And that's what makes you so respected by others, because you respect them. So, sometimes there are those who say, well, Commissioner, you didn't come up on the FDNY side, you came up on the EMS side, and yet you're leading the fire department. Does that put you at a disadvantage, even though we've had commissioners who had no fire experience, right? So what do you say to them?
Right. I would say thank you for your question, because it's an important question. When we hear something like fire commissioner, the assumption is that we're fighting fires. And the reality is, in this fire department, which is the largest in our country, we are made up of both fire and EMS services. EMS services are the bulk of the call volume that happens within the fire department. This fire department responds to 2.2 million runs per year. 1.6 million of those runs are EMS medical-related runs. So I would say that's important. And the other thing that's important is I'm the 37th fire commissioner. Of the 37, 2/3 of those people never had firefighting experience. Wow. It's an administrative civilian position, and of those fire commissioners, 37, 100% of them never fought a fire while they were fire commissioner. So, I am a paramedic also, but I'm not only here not to fight fires, I'm not here to start IVs either. My job is to secure the future of the fire department and provide for the people who work here and are willing to put their lives on the line for a stranger. That's my job. My job is to take care of the people that do this job and to make sure that New York has the best care that we can give them.
Wow. I have to comment, because every time I've heard you speak from the time that you took this role, you have been assertive, but not arrogant. And to piggyback on what Rabbi said, that's important, because you got hit hard. I mean, the claims that you were DEI and that you really couldn't handle the position, on and on and on. And you always kept an even keel, pointed to your experience, and not arrogantly, but with a degree of humility. And I think that's the kind of leadership that men can follow, that everyone can follow. And I just wanted to point that out.
I appreciate that. And, I just understand that. First, I appreciate that other people have different opinions. And it did not change the fact that I was still the fire commissioner. So, I'm happy to talk through some of the information that may not be accurate. And I don't take it personally. These are people that just want to be part of a conversation. So sometimes it requires that we have difficult interactions or difficult conversation to get to the truth.
I have a very close relationship with Commissioner Cassano. You remember him?
I do. I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
He's the gold standard also in the profession. He doesn't sleep through the night. Can you be a commissioner of a department that, is called upon at any moment to save lives? Can you sleep?
No.
The
answer is no, we don't.
Some of us function a little sleep, but you're always one eye open, one ear open, like the phone's going to ring. Right?
I will tell you, our alarm clocks are very different from the rest of the world. When people are calling us in the middle of the night, what's on the other end is not easy. So no, we don't sleep. No.
So
you can't come into a position like that without having vision. What do you see for the future of FDNY here?
Well, I'll tell you my vision. I hope it comes true. I'll put it out there in the universe. One is I hope we do get parity for EMS. I think we're going to lead the nation on this particular topic. There's a nationwide shortage of people coming into the EMS profession, and I think New York is going to be the one to make this a different type of conversation. I really feel optimistic about it. So I do see that. And I do see us investing, and it's going to be difficult. We know we're in a fiscal situation here in the city, but we have to at least push forward, really setting ourselves up for the next 50 years of service to this city. Our city is growing around us, and we have to be able to adapt and prepare some of our infrastructure to last that long. We're 160 years old as a fire department, and a lot of our buildings and things that we use are 100 plus years old. So they're showing their age. We need to invest and make sure that the people who take care of those in their moment of need have everything they need to be able to do that.
Beautiful.
Sometimes I'll ask a firefighter, if I offered you a different job sitting behind a desk at a firm, double the salary, would you do it? And they say, no, I love this. I wouldn't give this up for anything. With all of the challenges I have to confront, it is something, it's a calling, as you said before. You see the reaction when people, see firefighters. I remember years ago, a woman told me her life was saved, EMS. And I said to her, what did you say when they arrived? She said, I looked at them and I said, I knew you would come. Mm-hmm. And I think you hear that and you recognize you're very much appreciated, you're beloved. And that's got to be a very rewarding feeling. We've come to the end of the segment. And by the way, Reverend Bernard is a co-chief chaplain.
I saw.
For NYPD.
Here we go.
I saw.
Here we go.
So, and I'm the chief chaplain. He's a co-chief
you know what he's emphasizing, right? NYPD needs two chiefs. FDNY only needs one,
they need
right?
two.
Okay.
But, and by the way, Rev and I speak every day, multiple times a day. We talk, how can we bring together, again, FDNY, NYPD, in the service of the city of New York. And it's just, it's an honor to be in the company of firefighters, EMS people like you who, you don't give a damn what other people say. You just want to do the right thing and keep doing what you're doing. And we are the ones who are the beneficiaries of that kind of determination.
Thank you so much.
Well said.
I appreciate that.
Well said, Rabbi. Thank you for being on the program, and we're cheering you on. Because if you're successful, we're all successful. So thank you. Thank you for your story.
Thank you, Reverend. I appreciate
it. So stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Red Apple Radio Networks. We'll be right back.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rev Rev and the Rabbi. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Rev, that was a great conversation with the fire commissioner. And you could see why she enjoys the respect of the department, because with her, it's title second, person first. And she really, when you see her walk into a room, she spends time talking to people one by one. She's not into all the pictures. She just wants to know who are you and why are you, with the department, how many you get a story about you. So when she sees you the second time, she can relate more to you. So it's just a great...
I will tell you, Rabbi, I find that when people are comfortable with what they do and who they are, it's a different conversation with that person. And people who are not sure, still trying to figure it out, filled with uncertainty. Yeah, there's a certain calmness. And boy, is it needed for the job that she does, right?
Yeah. We go back with Mayor Bloomberg, and I always found he didn't try to impress you with the money, with the things. He was
Wait a minute. He didn't have to. He had the money.
Yeah. But he didn't try to hide. You know who I am? You know what I do? He was, he was very comfortable. I always admire that in people. When you're comfortable with yourself, you don't have to impress other people.
Yeah,
so it's a nice quality.
You know who's really the person who has the money when they're in the room, because they don't show it.
Yeah,
they don't have to.
Yeah,
and who's got the power? So, where do we start?
Well, we have a commissioner who has to deal with tragedies, and this past week there was a tragedy at LaGuardia Airport. With that truck and the incoming plane, Air Canada, the collision, pilot, co-pilot lost their lives, people were injured. And the controller, he said, I messed up. And when they looked at it, he didn't see, we could always, put blame, but I don't think the blame is on him. I think it's just one of those unfortunate tragedies that happened.
You express what this controller said. I was listening to an interview with another controller, and he was talking about just how conscientious they are of the job that they do and the responsibility on them. And that came from a deep sense of, I failed the people I serve. I failed the position that I hold. And he really unpacked it in a way that you wouldn't think. You know what I mean? We're quick to say, that's an admission of guilt. But no, for this controller talking about his colleague, it was an expression of profound sense of responsibility that you don't want to be the one who make a mistake, especially with the cost of life. I don't know the inner workings of what took place with that, but he's going to carry the loss of life for the rest of his life. That's real.
It's very easy to be an outsider, look from afar, and to assign blame and say, well, if I were there, this wouldn't have happened. Right. Or whatever. Yeah, everybody knows better from the outside. I asked the same question. How do you now continue with your life in a meaningful way, carrying this hole in your heart for what transpired? And I think it requires first a lot of support. I mean, people around him who just reassure him, say, we're with you. You happen to be a great professional. And unfortunately, this happened, but that doesn't diminish your professionalism. So hopefully he can continue his life in a meaningful way, surrounded by people who respect him.
Yeah, and that job lacks recruits. There are a lot of people who don't want to take on that responsibility. That's a lot on you, man. And they're coordinating with thousands of flights, and one little mistake can be fatal, just like that. So what do we do when they're not? And ideally, in this one report I was reading, ideally it takes two people.
Yeah.
And when you only have one person on the job at the time, and maybe you need two or three, that's a tough thing for the industry.
Yeah. And here you have plane flying in, truck on the ground, And I've heard people say, well, why are we having trucks on the ground when planes are coming in? Again, we'll re-examine, we'll re-question, but at the end of the day, you have a human being who, as someone said, did the best that he could under those circumstances.
And our prayers, our prayers go out to the families of the two pilots who lost their life, and others who were injured. But we understand. That's one thing, Rabbi. In our line of work, we have to peel back the layers. We have to understand things beyond the easy black and white. You know what I mean? To say and put it in that box and that's it. No. What are the circumstances behind it? What was happening with the individuals who were involved? We ask those questions. We have to, because that's what being pastoral is all about.
Well, then you have the social media experts. The guys who post the stuff day after day, week after week. They know better. They have all the answers. They point the finger. They could never hold such a position. They don't have qualifications, but they know what they would do if they were there. So it's tough to be in, but thankfully there are a lot of good people surrounding him, and you don't think you can get through the trauma of that episode, but somehow you find the strength when you have this reassurance from people who love you very much. So,
this is true.
Let me ask you this question.
Uh-oh.
No, this is, I think this is something we can all relate to. A group of students.
Yeah, I'm on the air. Go ahead.
A group of students was asked, what would you prefer to be? Good looking, rich, smart, or popular? What do you think the majority opinion was amongst young people, teenagers?
I will have to refer back to a study that we did, that I did along with a pastor in Kuala Lumpur. I was spending a lot of time in Asia, helping Asian churches in Singapore and Indonesia and Malaysia to build their congregation and leadership, etc. And this particular church in Kuala Lumpur had a lot of college students coming because it was close to one of the universities. And we actually put out a questionnaire in terms of, career path. And we put celebrity. What do you want to be? What do you want to be? We put celebrity as the last item on the list.
Right.
Rabbi, that had the greatest response.
Yeah.
And that's consistent with what you and I were talking about during the break. We have a celebrity-obsessed culture, society, and everybody wants to be one.
Everybody wants to be liked. And very often what that does to you, it makes you fragile because you're not able to cope with some of the criticisms that are thrown at you because you want to be liked. You're also not able to take positions, on things that need to be addressed because you want to be liked. So being popular sometimes takes its first place, and being principled takes second place. So and look, when you're in the pulpit, you want to be popular, you want people to like you, but there are things you're going to say that may sound harsh to some.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it may cost you, but ultimately it enhances you. And you got to look in the mirror.
I will tell you, it represents a shift in our society. At one time, significance was tied to contribution, what you contributed, what you built, what you taught, what you created, or what you sacrificed. But now it's tied to visibility. How many people see you, follow you, validate you. And that's the world that we're in. And that's a tough thing. It's not healthy.
How many likes do you get, right?
Exactly,
right. Yeah, it's, and look at the price some people pay to be popular. The self-image is so fragile, easily shattered, that you're almost ready to do anything just to win the approval of others, who at the end of the day don't really matter that much in your life. It's you. You have to matter to yourself. If you look in the mirror and you say, I'm proud of who I am, it doesn't matter much what others say about you as long as you know you're being truthful with yourself.
Yeah, and that's important because, like you said, it's subtle. The danger is very subtle because visibility begins to replace virtue as the means of worth, as the measure of worth. And so if you, and there have been young people who've committed suicide, Rabbi, because they went from a height of likes and followers, and all of a sudden they said something or did something,
right,
and it began to drop, and they could not handle the rapid disapproval, and they took their life.
I remember when I first became a rabbi, there was a Rabbi Harry Halpern, East Midwood Jewish Center in Brooklyn. He said, when you first begin as a rabbi, and this is true of clergy of all denominations, when you first begin, you feel terrible if you have one enemy in the congregation. When you conclude your career, you're happy if you still have one friend. And what he was saying was that, being on the pulpit, taking a sermon seriously, saying things that may not often be well received by some people, but at least what FDR said, I hope at the end of my life I still have one friend, and the friend is inside of me. That friend is me, that I have to like who I am. So it's an important lesson.
Yep. Well, we got to go to another break, and we'll be back with more conversation on your Sunday morning right here on the Rev and the Rabbi.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rev and the Rabbi. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
So, Reverend, on the calendar, I see Passover, I see Easter, and I think it was ingenious of Christians to make sure that Easter was the same week of Passover, so you guarantee good weather for your holiday. But Easter, if you have to look at a sacred holiday, is it the most sacred of all?
Absolutely. And the reason is the resurrection. Christianity is founded on the life, death, but most importantly, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Without that, our whole story is shattered. So Easter is incredibly important to us. It's one of the biggest holidays, and you'll have more people going to church, whether it's out of ritual for them or just because they're culturally Christian and they do it to feel good. But that's the biggest day of the year that people attend services. The resurrection, that's a big thing. And you know what? Resurrection is not just a body, coming back alive. It's hope. It's hope beyond the grave. It's symbolic of new beginnings. All right, that no matter how bad things get, you can rise from the ashes of defeat and start all over again. It speaks of newness of life. That's why it's so important, because all of those themes are tied to it.
It's interesting. You look at Passover, Easter, and the bitterness of slavery, and ultimately the sweetness of redemption, entrance into the promised land. You look at Easter, and it's preceded by Good Friday, right? But Good Friday is not the final story. So once again, you may begin with this, despair, but then you have, the determination that a better day is coming.
Yeah.
And then we've often said we're prisoners of hope.
Yeah, I think about that Saturday, what the disciples went through, because according to the scriptural record, Jesus dies the late afternoon of the Friday, right? Mm-hmm. And so the day in between, can you imagine what that was like for men who really thought that, this was Messiah, this was their hope, their dreams fulfilled, this is redemption, this is everything that the scriptures, promised in this person, and now that hope is snatched away from you. and you're sitting in despair. You're wondering, where do I go from here? You know, those guys who were with him gave up 3 years of their life, you know, their family. And now it seemed snatched away. So I think about that period where things are stripped from us. Will we continue to hope? Will we continue to believe? And that's the real test of faith.
And thankfully, we live at a time when the juxtaposition of Passover and Easter can come without bloodshed. Because looking back at history, it wasn't that pretty. It was pretty ugly. I mean, there were fiery sermons castigating or condemning the Jews to because of deicide. I remember hearing in Europe people were afraid to come out on Good Friday because of some of the sermonic messages were antagonistic to the Jews. And yet now you and I can easily talk about it. We're not threats to one another. We're not accusing the other. Although, look, there are always going to be bigots. There are always going to be, your hate mongers or those who just can't accept, a different interpretation, a different chapter. It still exists in some places, some hearts, but not for the most part.
Boy, I tell you, it's rubbing off. You're talking like a Christian there. I like that, Rabbi. Look at what you did to
I know
Savior.
I'm talking to a Christian. I didn't know I was talking like a Christian. I don't know. I don't know if that word gets out. I'll tell you, I may be in trouble.
Well, we won't tell anybody. Neither will our audience of millions of people either. But it's interesting. I don't know, because I don't think the Jewish religion had this, because it was pretty closed and pretty tight. But when Christians were continuing to grow and the Christian religion evolve in doctrine and beliefs and structure, ritual and practice, it was happening within the context of the Roman Empire, which was a pagan, empire. It was pluralistic, religiously pluralistic, and the early Christians were marginalized. But when we have Easter, all right, that doesn't come from a biblical term. Things like Easter eggs, the Easter bunny. You and I were, laughing about that during the break. The break, you guys have to have matzah, but we get
for 8 days.
We get all the
for
sweets.
8 days. I'm looking at our producer Elias Roth and saying, although he likes gefilte fish, he said, which is not always popular with everyone, but. The fact that matzah and that, that's not easy sometimes to eat matzah for 8 days. But
but you didn't incorporate. The Jews did not incorporate pagan symbolism into their faith. We did, because eggs and bunnies have nothing to do with the resurrection of Jesus or, that whole story. But it was incorporated. And today, look at the Easter bonnet, the Easter parade, down Fifth Avenue. When I was a kid, I was fascinated coming into the city and seeing those things. But it's part of how culture grows and develops, and we try our best to keep that holiday in its purity, to understand that it is foundational to our faith, and that is new life and new beginnings in the person of our Lord. So,
it's interesting.
You asked.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So it's interesting, as I mentioned to you in one of our conversations off air, that when I would first see the public display of holidays, you see Christmas trees in the public square, I get a little bit nervous because we're a minority people. And you say, well, are they trying to impose in any way their tradition on us? And then I recognized after a while, you know what, we can live with this diversity of spirit. Diversity of practice. So then you'd see the Hanukkah menorah, the Christmas tree, and other, ritualistic celebrations being displayed. And now we have Easter, Passover. We're comfortable with one another. We visit one another. We learn with one another. We listen to one another. It's just a shame that you and I are telling these stories, and yet the world is still filled with so much hatred.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And what you're saying, Rabbi, is a problem in our nation today, because there are some who are threatened by the presence of other religions and other beliefs and practices. And, they would like America to become completely a Christian culture, and there you have those who, they're quite radical in their Christianity and want to, like you said, impose Christian beliefs and culture onto the nation as a whole. And I think that's dangerous because it breaks away from the original intent of the founding documents, and that is that there would not be a state religion, that there would be this freedom, religious freedom, and the importance of respecting other belief systems. And I think some of that is in jeopardy today because of what people feel.
Don't you say that God's house has many rooms, and there's many places where we can practice our tradition? There's room for all of us. We don't have to threaten one another. If anything, when I see people who are proud of their Christianity, it makes me feel good that I'm proud of my Judaism. So seeing the other display and say, means something to me, says, well, this is what it means to me. And let's continue the conversation. Let's talk to each other, enlighten each other without that spirit of triumphalism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And appreciate the differences. Jesus in one encounter said, my house shall be called, it is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. And that's the way we need to think of it.
That is inscribed, and I think also it was in Isaiah, who I think we said it first,
Isaiah
right?
Isaiah the prophet.
And you see it inscribed on many houses of worship. Love your neighbor on many houses of worship. So it's like if you travel on a bridge, you can be in separate lanes, but you learn how to travel together with one another. Rev, thank you, and I wish you also a blessed Easter. And it's good to learn about the other, but it also it inspires you to learn about your own too.
Exactly. Good. What do we believe? What do we practice? It's important. And to all of you, no matter what faith you practice, you are in our prayers, and we wish you God's best. Till next time, the Reverend the Rabbi.
Thanks for listening to the Rev and the Rabbi. You can hear the Rev and the Rabbi Sunday mornings at 7. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.